Hey everyone, tonight I wanted to share with you 5 things that I like about DBD and 5 things that I do not. So starting off with something that I think is actually one of the strongest parts of the game is its music. It's incredible. The music team has done an absolutely fantastic job on just about everything, in my opinion. I'm talking lobby music, the terror radius tracks, the chase music. It's all so incredibly well done. I think they do a fantastic job just encapsulating the mentality, the theme, the presence of a lot of the characters through the music. It can be really cool, but also deeply unsettling all at the same time. And changing it up, a lot of it, other than the default chase music tracks, obviously, there's a wide variety of what they have in the game. And speaking of the default tracks, I love that they're updating the default tracks for a lot of the characters, going back and redoing it to update it all. Personally, I think Trapper should keep the default, the original, just kind of as Trapper's own unique music, but I think all the other ones definitely need their own chase music for sure, and lobby music, etc. Now for the ones that they've updated in the last year, I really like all the lobby tracks and the terror radius music. Some of the chase music is hit or miss, in my opinion, which makes me a little nervous for Plague because I have a feeling she's pretty close to next on their next update. And I also think it's pretty questionable that we'll get any of the old licenses that are using the default chase music and the default lobby themes. I doubt we'll get updates to those because that would probably require them to completely rework the license, which I don't think is going to happen in most cases. One of them maybe, but probably not all of them. So I think we're going to be stuck with the default tracks on most of the old licenses that don't have their own unique music just yet. But on the whole, I think the music team has done an incredible job. Everything from Silent Hill, having the original composer come back and do a new track, but definitely in the feel of Silent Hill. And then you got the Resident Evil tracks, taking a new track, but making it feel like Wesker or Nemesis, or like it was right out of a Resident Evil boss battle. They've done an incredible job. So I think one of the things I love most about this game is the music, hands down. Now, something that I dislike about DBD is MMR, and I know I'm not alone in that. That might be the obvious one, right? I started playing during the first Resident Evil chapter, aka right before they added MMR to the game. So my first DBD experience was actually pre-MMR, and I loved it. I had no issues with it. I didn't care that sometimes I would go up against killers who were way better at the game than me. Didn't matter to me. Now, I started taking the game more seriously around the time that MMR was added to the game, just a few months later. And I'll say, along with everybody else who has said it, the game does not need MMR. And personally, I think it's made worse by having it. DBD, at its core, is a party game. Its balance is oddly in its imbalance and RNG. So in my opinion, we shouldn't treat an unbalanced RNG-based game like a competitive shooter. Now, I will concede that if they have some sort of data on the back end that shows that MMR is actually leading to greater retention among casual players, then I'd be more okay with it and accept it, because ultimately that's better for the health of the game. But as of right now, it just seems to me like an unnecessary battle that nobody on the player side seems to like. Now for another thing I like, it's the range of licenses that they have. I mean, they're trying to make DBD the multiverse of horror, right? And they've really done an excellent job so far. I know there's a lot of licenses still missing, and a lot of licenses that we would love to see come to the game. I, for one, am banking on Alien this year. I would really love to see that. A decent consolation would be Predator, but I'm hoping to see Alien. But they've got licenses from movies, TV, to video games all across the board. Myers, Freddy, Bubba, Saw, Pinhead, Ringu. I mean, they've even got the Ghostface mask. If you didn't know, it's not actually a license from Scream. They licensed the mask itself. So it's actually an original character with the Ghostface mask. Kind of a combination original licensed thing going on. It's pretty neat. Then you have Stranger Things, obviously. And then you've got video games. Silent Hill, Resident Evil, couple Resident Evil. They've got such a wide variety of licenses and more coming. I mean, we've also got Ash from Evil Dead and Nicolas Cage coming to the game. Not a character he played, but actually him. It's pretty cool what they're doing with the licenses, and they truly are making DBD the multiverse of horror, and I love that. And on top of that, I also think for the most part, they handled the licenses very well. The music, the sound effects, the range of cosmetics. They might not have a lot going on like Freddy, it's just got the one, but it's pretty spot on. But then you have others like Pyramid Head who have, obviously pretty much straight from the game, but then also some very Silent Hill inspired ones. Same thing with Demogorgon. You got Nancy and Steve having a host of cosmetics from the show. You've got the Resident Evil characters with a whole spread of cosmetics as well. And then in the case of the killers, most of them play pretty well. I mean, people are definitely divided on Freddy for sure. Maybe a couple of the others. But for the most part, a lot of, especially recently, the licensed killers have been at least fun, if not strong, in the game as well. I mean, Wesker is probably one of the most fun and most strong in the game. Onryo wasn't as strong, but A lot of people have fun with her still. Myers is kind of the same way. Pyramid Head's great. Demo's one of the most balanced characters in the game. I mean, they typically do a pretty good job with the licenses, and so I love that. Another thing I don't really like about the game is the simplicity of Survivor. And what I mean by that is I personally find Survivor a little bit boring. And I feel like there needs to be more to do without actually extending the length of the trial or making the trials harder for Survivor. Just more interesting. I'm thinking something to change up the gameplay that's not optional like totems. Like I said, Survivor to me can be boring at times. Part of that is that I'm not a great looper. So I completely understand for those of you who seek out getting chased and have a lot of fun doing that is energizing. That is, you get your adrenaline rush off of that. That's fun. For sure. Even not being very good at that, it's fun for me. But it also feels like I spent a lot of time just holding left click on a gen. So that's why I gravitated in the beginning towards being a killer main, because there was always something to do. There was never a dull moment playing as the killer. Now there's also benefits to this because it is more chill to play Survivor while I'm streaming because I get to engage with chat a whole lot more. So I do like that aspect. And I understand that not everybody wants to be constantly having to do something, because I know for a lot of people, that's why killer is stressful, because they've always got to be doing something. There's always something for them to be managing and it just gets overwhelming. So I get that. I get that Survivor could be that sit back and chill, relax option where sometimes you have your adrenaline soaked moments of chases, but other times you're able to just sit back, chill while somebody else is taking the chase. I get that. And if that appeals to you, totally understand that. I just think that Survivor needs something to break up the typical gameplay loop of either you're in chase or you're holding left click. I get that there's also, going for saves and that kind of stuff. So count that in there too. But I just feel like there needs to be something more in terms of the actual gen process than just sitting there holding left click or RB. I'm thinking more complexity without making the game less approachable, which I know seems like an oxymoron. I get it. I feel like I'm full of bad ideas on how to do this, but I'm just thinking something to make Survivor a little more engaging. Not harder, not even more intense, just more engaging. Like, what if you could take apart one of the generators to be able to repair other generators faster? It'd be this trade-off mentality, right? Because you're not only making it a little bit easier for the killer because they have one less gen to patrol, but you're also making it a little easier on yourselves because now you can do gens faster. Or what if there was, instead of just being, complete 5 gens, there was some sort of Among Us style mini games around the map that also progressed towards your escape. Like I said, these could all be terrible ideas. I'm sure you'll let me know all the blind spots that I'm not thinking about in the comments. I'm not saying my ideas are the best. I'm not a video game designer, and I'm not going to say that this is going to be easy to balance or anything like that. Those are just examples of something that we could do to potentially make Survivor just more interesting. Again, I'm not looking for it to be harder. I'm not looking for it to be always intense, always on, just something more to where there's always something to do rather than just sit here on a gen and then pick up a chase. That's why I know there's a lot of people who, really enjoy the chases and try to seek out the chases because that's the interesting part of the game to them. But what if the actual gen process or the escaping process was more interesting, more engaging? There was more to do, more to change things up than just left click. That's all I'm saying. Just something a little more. It doesn't have to be super elaborate or complex or anything, and I might have already overthought it, but just something to do a little bit more. So another thing that I love about the game is its original characters, especially on the killer side of the game. I mean, to be honest, in a lot of ways, I think they have some of the most horrifying designs, in a good way, throughout all the medium of horror. You got Trapper, you got Doctor, who's one of the most hideous and just nerve-wracking things I've ever seen in my life. You got Plague, you got Artist. Beauty and horror mixed together really well. Then you got Dredge, the absolute stuff of nightmares. And then the newest killer to the game, the Singularity. He's pretty disturbing as well. I'd argue that a lot of the original killers that they have in the game are actually more disturbing than most of the licenses out there. Now, a lot of them are clear nods to established horror icons too, but even in those cases, I think they do a great job of innovating on that and creating something new out of it. Like Trapper or Hillbilly, for instance. And then they take established horror tropes, but then change it up. A good example of this would be Hux, or the Singularity. He's a reverse cyborg. Most of the time, cyborgs start as a human, but become more machine, right? That's what we think of when we think sci-fi, horror, cyborg stuff. But they designed Hux backwards, where he actually started as an AI who wants to become biological. And so he's gathering up biological bits as he goes and just creating himself to be more machine / human. It's really creepy. Then you've got the Dredge, who's the manifestation of evil thoughts and just consumes all of its victims and becomes stronger each time. And it's just, I mean, it's the stuff of nightmares, and I love it, quite frankly. I think they do a phenomenal job with that. Another thing that I don't like about the game is what I would call the survivor or killer rule books. Now, both sides do this. I'm not calling out one side over the other. These are the expectations that one side holds against the other. And if you don't play according to these expectations, they get mad. Now, I'll be honest, I actually don't think the majority of the player base feels this way on the whole. But there's enough people who are vocal either in the endgame chat or on Twitter or, wherever to make their minds known that there is a rule book that you should know and you should play by, regardless of which side you're playing. I'm talking about shaming the other side for choosing perks or playing in legitimate ways, legitimate play styles, in the way the game is intended to be played, or just simply doing the objective and doing it well and doing it with skill, and suddenly we're yelling at each other in the endgame chat about it. Back when I first started playing the game, I was scared to run Noed because it was a good chance you would get some salt in the endgame chat. It's not as bad anymore, but it's like, it's a good perk. I actually, even as Survivor, I loved going against old Noed even, not before it was nerfed. To this day, the trials I remember most are a handful from when I first started playing the game and went against pre-nerf Noed, because they were exciting, because they were epic. I remember those trials more than I remember the trials from stream on Friday. Or like the new version of that is Lightborn suddenly. It's wrong for a killer to run Lightborn. It's silly. Same thing from the killer perspective on the Survivor side, getting upset that them running brand new part or dead hard or stuff like that. Or just when we get mad for the other side doing the objective. Suddenly we're upset because survivors are doing gens too fast or killers are, actually not letting the survivors do the gens. It's like, what? No, that's the whole point. That's the gameplay. That's the game. We get mad at survivors for trying to escape and killers for trying to stop the survivors from escaping. It's silly. So yes, there is toxic behavior that extends outside of the game that needs to be called out, for sure. That's not what I'm talking about. And for this discussion, we can just set aside things like teabagging, bully squads, bleeding out survivors, face camping, tunneling, etc. We can set those in a gray area. That's a different conversation for a different time. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about kind of those, are they legitimate play styles, but also kind of bad manners? Those things I'll just set aside for right now. What I'm talking about is just getting mad at the other side for actually just playing the game, for choosing perks that are in the game meant to be used a certain way, or for actually just playing the objective and doing it well. And I think what happens is we can feel bad about our underperformance sometimes, and so we blame it on the other side. We, instead of respecting their skill or respecting them for doing their job, we get upset instead and try to defer sometimes our underperformance on them. And the game's RNG too, so sometimes it's not that we underperformed, it's just the game didn't go well for us, or it was more killer side of that game, or it was more survivor side of that game. But then we blame each other for it, and it gets silly. Like, let's just play the game and have fun playing the game. And if it doesn't go well for us, just re-up. And if it really doesn't go well for you, just play another game that night. I mean, seriously, it's kind of silly. So again, I'm not talking about toxic behavior. I'm not talking about like kind of those gray areas of is tunneling, acceptable or not. Like we can just put those off to the side. That's a different discussion for a different day. I'm talking just simply about getting upset at each other for actually just playing the game the way the game is designed to be played. Like, I'm sorry, if I load into a lobby and there's already 4 survivors in there all running flashlights, I'm probably throwing on Lightborn. It's just smart at that point. But then as killer, I can't be mad at the survivors for doing the gens as efficiently as possible either. That's why in stream all the time I'm kind of joking around like, oh, they're gen rushing and all that. I clearly make light of it because I think it's silly to get upset at the other side for playing the game as efficiently as they can play it. Now, if they're breaking rules, if they're hacking, if they're cheating, if they're being a jerk about it, like that's totally different. What I'm talking about is just getting upset at the other side for playing the game the way it's meant to be played and doing it effectively. I think it's silly and I don't like it. Another thing I like about the game is its depth of lore. When I started playing the game, I had no idea it had such a rich lore behind it, but I quickly fell in love learning as much as I could about the game. I mean, you've got an entity who abducts people from their world, brings it into its own realm, and then pits survivors against killers to be able to feed off of their emotions of hope and fear and anger and all of that, only to recycle them again and again and again until they become emotionless husks to be discarded. That's some pretty creepy stuff. And that's just the foundational lore. You add in things like the multiverse, where you've got multiple versions of the same character existing within the entity's realms. Like Hattie, for instance. You've got Tome Hattie. You've got Game Hattie. But on top of that, then you've got the observer seeing stories of Hattie and going, these are legends out there in the multiverse. It's not even a real version of Hattie. There's legends that permeate throughout the multiverse, and it's just crazy stuff and layers that they wouldn't have to put into the game, but they do, and it's great and it's wonderful and I love it and I geek out about it, obviously. And then my mind gets blown when I start to think about how, in Feng Min's world. Resident Evil is a video game, and Silent Hill is a video game where she'll cosplay as those characters, but then the entity actually reaches out into a realm in which, you know, the Resident Evil characters are real, the Silent Hill characters are real, and brings them in. And so you have a Feng Min working on a generator dressed as Jill Valentine next to the real Jill Valentine. It's just crazy stuff. I love it. And then you've got the deep lore that surrounds things like the Black Veil cult that serves the entity, the Imperiate, which fights against the entity. And then you got the story of the Pariahs, which surrounds Felix and Elodie and the three others. There's a lot of room to grow still. And then you've got stories like Kate escaping the entity, Michaela seeing the entity manifest in her own realm, takes her friend Julian into the fog, but we have yet to see him. Or Michaela's dreams of Claudette in the entity's realm and the hillbilly before she gets taken into the fog. There's a bunch of layers and mystery to the lore behind DBD, and I love it, and I love exploring it. Another thing I don't like about DBD is there's no time limit on the trials, at least not a reasonable one. You know, you see the hackers who are holding streamers hostage until they DC. Also heard from someone in my community where they got held hostage for 30 minutes as killer because the survivors found a glitch where they couldn't get to them, and it's like hearing stories like that. It's, come on, there needs to be a time limit on the game. Something long enough to allow for the kind of the longer, more epic trials where a lot is going on, but to prevent those trials that just drag on because, you know, the killer is just patrolling a 3-gen forever and nobody can do anything, and the survivors are just hiding and it just goes nowhere. Or where the survivors have found an exploit to be able to prevent the killer from being able to get to them, or where, you know, there's hackers involved. There needs to be something where, hey, after 30 minutes or something, if one gen is done, the exit gates power and the endgame collapse starts, and the survivors have a limited time to get out at that point, and the trial comes to an end. And if no generators have been completed, the trial just ends. I don't know if 30 minutes is long enough. You tell me, let me know down in the comments, because I don't really have trials, legitimate trials, that go longer than 30 minutes. That would be a long one to me. But just something to prevent people from holding the game hostage to where the other side has to DC and take that DC penalty. I just think there needs to be some sort of natural cutoff. I can't remember if there already is one in the game, but it's definitely way too long if it is. So I don't like that. There needs to be a cutoff, in my opinion. And the last thing I'm going to throw on this list as to what I like about DBD is its simple complexity. And what I mean by that is it's a very approachable game, but it also has a lot of depth to it as well, between the killer's abilities, various perks, add-ons, etc. There's a lot going on that can change up the game quite a bit each time you play. The core of the game is approachable, but it also has enough depth to be interesting in the semi-long term. I know a lot of you may have played the game since the beginning and it might be getting a little repetitive now. Totally understand that. But when I saw the game before I started playing, I just thought it was just the simple party game that would get boring after a few trials, and that's not at all the case. There is enough depth there for some long-term enjoyment of the game, and I love it. Something else that I don't like about the game is that I feel survivors need something to make them more unique, like killers. So killers have their special abilities, right? Each killer is distinct and different from each other because of their special ability that cannot be shared amongst them all. So there's motivation to get them all and rotate through them all, or at least the ones that you resonate with or you think might be fun or you find fun. But then with survivors, once you get their teachables unlocked, they're basically skins, and you can unlock their teachables without even playing them. So a lot of survivors, you have no motivation to play if you don't feel some sort of connection with them. So I pretty much just work on unlocking all the teachables, and then I play Dwight or the Resident Evil characters because those are the ones that I resonate with most or have the most interest in. And then there's some that I have absolutely no interest in even playing once unless I'm doing a video on it. And so to me, that's kind of sad, and feel like there needs to be more reason to actually run the other survivors. So I'd love to see survivors get some sort of unique perk or ability that is tied just to them. And I'm not talking about taking one of their 3 perks and making it tied to just them. But I don't know if it'd be a subtle special ability like the killers have, or it'd be a 4th perk that's only on that survivor. And I get this would be absolutely massive to do at this point in the game's life and a horrible job to balance it all. I get it. How would you give a survivor a special ability without it upsetting the whole balance of the game, especially once you have 4 survivors in there, all with special abilities? How do their special abilities stack? How would, what if you had 4 Dwights in there? Would suddenly Dwight's ability be way overpowered? How do you prevent that kind of stuff? I get it. It's a huge balance nightmare. And I'm not even saying that's the best idea. I'm just saying there needs to be some sort of motivation other than, a daily ritual that pops up that says, oh, escape with this character, which I immediately skip. There needs to be some motivation for me to want to play through all the survivors, rotate through them, and to play some of the ones that I have. At this point, I have no intention of playing. I don't have a problem with any of the survivors. There's just some I resonate with more than others. And so I just think there could be something to motivate us to play and rotate more throughout all the survivors. If there was something unique to them, either a perk or some sort of special ability, which I don't know how that would super differ from another perk, but you know what I'm saying. Just something to say, oh, I want to play Meg today because I feel like being able to do that. Or, I see Bill in the lobby, and so I know that Adam's special ability or this, perk that is unique to Adam pairs really well with Bill's, and so I'm going to run Adam this trial because we'll be able to work together. I don't know, just something to motivate us to rotate around. I just think the survivors need something to make them more unique. And it would add another level of depth to the game, which I'm all about. Again, I know I'm full of bad ideas. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. All right, so this has been 5 things that I like and 5 things that I don't like about the game. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. I love chatting with you down there. I did want to take a moment to thank our channel members for your support of the channel. If you're interested in becoming a member and gaining access to some unique perks, click that join button to learn more. If you enjoyed the video, would you please hit that like button to let me know? And if you've enjoyed the content but aren't already subscribed, would you please consider doing so? We're trying to get to 15,000 subscribers by the end of the year. And as always, you are awesome, stay awesome, and we'll see you in the next episode. Cheers.